national security.
It definitely seems like a lot to juggle.
With you, I think President Trump is indicating.
Good morning.
And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment from very high above all the insipid Facebook trolls and completely irrelevant twits. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Wednesday. Now, I meant to cover this yesterday and ask you just a couple of questions, but have you noticed the headlines lately? They are becoming increasingly crazy. Now, I mean, we know the left is all about clickbait, and we know that the more outrageous the headline, and this is not necessarily true, but generally speaking, the more outrageous the headline, the more the likelihood is somebody's going to click on it and say, what the heck is this about? But it seems recently that we are seeing some pretty scary headlines. And unfortunately, none of them, well, the ones I'm going to show you today anyway, none of them are clickbait. None of them are made up. None of them are from the Onion. None of them are from the Babylon Bee. But they're a result of what happens after a Democrat administration. When the Democrats run out of the tricks in their bag, when they're done pulling out rabbits, or what they think are rabbits, and then the real results of their policies start to set in. You can only run a country into the ground for so long before you start seeing the results of it. That's one of the reasons why, as a historian, I tell you that you really can't judge an administration until several years later, because a lot of the things that presidents do, they don't show their results until many years later. So think about 2008, the financial crisis, the mortgage meltdown that we had. Obama said that we had so many banks that were just too big to fail, and we just had to do something. Well, in the short term, okay, some of the bigger banks didn't go belly up. Some of the big ones did, rightfully so. By the way, we should not get involved in the free market. That's not the role of government. Government should absolutely stay out of business. But in 2008, we didn't. Well, several years later, after the short-term impacts of those big, gigantic banks not going under, we saw one of the things that we're experiencing right now, though not a direct result of 2008, massive inflation. Now, the inflation rate, according to most economists, they say it should be around 2%, 1.5% to 2%. And that accounts for new printing of money. Money wears out. It's paper, or cotton, really, and you have to replace it. And so the normal rate of inflation should be 1.5% to 2%. But after 2008, and certainly after the Biden administration, we saw an explosion. And during the Trump administration, too. Let's just absolutely be clear about all of it. We saw an explosion of spending. Certainly during COVID, everybody was getting checks in their mailbox. That money had to come from somewhere. And in this case, it was printed out of thin air. Well, it takes a while for you to see all of those impacts. And, there's a headline on Breitbart this morning that inflation is up 3% over last year. Great holiday tidings for you. Your money is worth less. But what I meant to do yesterday is just ask you a simple question. Which one of these headlines makes you want to poop your pants the most? I mean, all of them are scary to me. But let's just run through the first one. First, the government has lost trillions of dollars. There are trillions of dollars that the Treasury, who, by the way, are kind of the accountants of the entire country. They're the people that are supposed to be able to tell us where all of our money is and isn't, how much we owe, how much we're bringing in. But they can't account for trillions. In fact, and I quote, at the White House, they're unable to track $6.2 billion that was sent to Ukraine. We're unable to track $24 billion that was spent to combat homelessness. At the Pentagon, they're unable to track $2.3 trillion in military spending. At the Treasury, and this is all happening at the same time, and these numbers are not cumulative, the Treasury is unable to track $5 trillion worth of pandemic spending. The IRS, now, they can't track any of their money, but they darn sure want to know if you transferred $601.57 to your friend. You better report it or you're going to jail. We can't track over $6 trillion right now. That's an insane amount of money. So, I mean, that's pretty scary right there. I mean, it pretty much tells you that the U.S. government has no idea what it's spending money on or has spent money on or where $6 trillion went. So that should be enough to make you want to crap your pants. But listen to this one. An Australian lab, and this is from the Washington Examiner as of yesterday, an Australian lab reports losing 323 deadly virus samples. And I quote, more than 300 live virus samples went missing from an Australian state-run laboratory in the province of Queensland in what public health officials have deemed a major breach of biosecurity. You think? Queensland Health Minister Tim Nicholls announced Monday that his department is launching an investigation into the 323 virus samples that went missing from the state virology laboratory in 2021 after a freezer storing these samples broke down. Nicholls told reporters that the security breach was discovered in August of 2023. Okay, so the breach actually occurred in 2021, but they didn't figure it out until 2 years later. Where do you suppose those 320 some odd viruses ended up? The investigation, quote, from the state's virology lab, the investigation that I've asked the Director General to investigate is the next step in the process to finding out what happened here, said Nicholls. It's important that we understand what went wrong. It's important to understand how we could do better. This is similar to the Secret Service saying, there were some failures at that Trump rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. We didn't exactly get everything done the way that we should have. So, but it's the same type of excuse. Oops, we lost 300 live, deadly viruses. Oops, the guy running for president and now the guy who's going to be the 47th president of the United States almost got whacked. There were some things that we could have done better. So that one is enough to make you crap your pants. But maybe this one might be the one that gets you. Headline. In a war against China, the U.S. runs out of missiles in a matter of weeks, House committee finds. And I quote, in a war with China, the United States would expend its stock of advanced missiles and bombs in less than a month and run out of some critical weapons in a matter of days, according to a war games simulation conducted by the House Select Committee on China. The Washington Free Beacon continues. America's cache of long-range anti-ship missiles critical to defending Taiwan in the sea battle in the case of a Chinese invasion will run dry within 3 to 7 days, according to the committee's findings. Within a month, meanwhile, the United States would run out of long-range cruise missiles. Taiwan's own supply of mid-range anti-ship missiles would also be expended within a week of the battle. The findings are raising alarms among lawmakers who worry America's defense industrial base is woefully unprepared to deliver the arms needed once China makes good on its repeated threats to invade Taiwan. With China's military rapidly growing, U.S. supply lines remain strained amid conflicts in the Middle East and other geopolitical hotspots. Now, most military experts would tell you that this shortage of military hardware is a direct result of all of the weapons that we were sending to Ukraine, which, by the way, we can't account for most of it. And if you didn't see the headline, the administration, the Biden administration, and we should just stop saying the Biden administration, because really it's a cabal, it's a committee of people that's running it. They're giving another $20 billion to Ukraine in the form of a loan, air quotes, loan, a loan that Ukraine probably will never pay back. So that's just three headlines to explain to you what a crazy situation we're in right now. And all of those are true. All of those are happening. It is a direct result of having a weak president, of having no handle on any spending, of passing crazy bills like the Inflation Reduction Act that shoveled money into just about every corner of the world. It's a direct result of having no control over the government whatsoever. This goes back to what Margaret Thatcher said about socialism, that it only works until you run out of other people's money to spend. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. Democrats have not had a control on anything except the passage of their policies. And of course, they couldn't get anything through Congress, so all of it was shoved through executive order. And when you do that, there's a lack of control. There's a lack of figuring out where all of this money and material is going. But I guess in the end, it is a direct result of allowing Democrats to be in charge, because this is almost always what happens. After the Barack Obama administration, our military was woefully depleted. And in 3 to 4 short years, Trump was able to build it up. And then Biden took over, and the exact same thing happened. Because the Democrats don't believe in peace through strength. They don't believe that America should be the most powerful country on the face of the earth. They don't believe that we should be able to repel any of our allies or enemies and scare them into submission. They don't believe that we should be able to look at an enemy or, an adversary and say, don't do this or we'll bomb you into the Stone Age. A perfect example of this was Barack Obama's apology tour. Does everybody remember that? Where he traveled the world apologizing to every country that he thought that we had, in some way maligned, or he in some way thought that we were mean to. He apologized the world over and basically told them that America needs to be knocked down a couple of notches. Well, that only works if you believe that there aren't evil people in the world. There are people that will do anything for their own purposes. There are people that do want to take over the world, or their little small chunk of it. There are people that will invade sovereign nations, like China. There are people, there are countries that want to subjugate their citizens. Now, we just recently saw Bashar al-Assad get overthrown in Syria. That's a good thing, but my question is, who is going to take over for them? This is a big question that Democrats never seem to answer. They're all in favor of different regimes being overthrown, but they never seem to answer the question of who is going to take over. Take the withdrawal out of Afghanistan. Democrats said we have to get out of there. We have to withdraw. We have to. We can't be engaged in this endless war. Interestingly enough, it was Barack Obama who, kept us in there as long as we did. But we withdrew, and who took over Afghanistan? The Taliban. The question I have with Syria is, who are the people that are going to be taking over? Who exactly are these rebels? Are they the ones that are going to be sympathetic to the interests of the United States? Are they the ones that are going to be in favor of democracy? See, this was a failure of a lot of these liberal-headed politicians for a really long time. That they believe that people that want democracy, that people will start a democratic government. But they neglect to look at history. What is the history of the people in that region? Syria, the rest of the Middle East, with the exception of Israel, has been fighting wars for like 2,000 years. And so if you are irresponsible with your foreign policy, if you are irresponsible with the people's money, you end up with dire situations like the ones that I mentioned at the top of the program, that in a war with China, we'll run out of missiles in a couple of weeks. that you'll see huge security breaches at labs across the world. Now, of course, we don't really have any control over what the Australian lab does, though it's just another thing that you add on top of all of the policy failures of the Biden administration. All I have to say, my friends, is thank God we got our Christmas present. Thank God President Trump is going to be back in office. But the problem is, what happens now between January 20th? More when we come back. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics live every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. on the Independence Network. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Cowboy State Politics is sponsored by FreedomGoldUSA.com. They are the working man's gold company. The economy is in turmoil. The stock market pretty much is out of control, and you never know what's going to happen with your finances or your income. One way that you can shore up everything is by investing in gold and silver. Go to freedomgoldusa.com/David for a free interview to discuss your options and find out if gold or silver is right for you. One more time, that's freedomgoldusa.com/David. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, Wyoming's most listened to conservative program. I've got the Fox News on in the studio, and there is a headline that, again, before the break, we were talking about headlines that are just almost too crazy to believe. Here's another one. White House and the FBI are unable to answer the New Jersey drone mystery. Now, you would think with all of the technology that we have, all of the military assets, everything that we're able to do, that we ought to be able to figure out who is flying these drones over New Jersey. But apparently not. And this is one of those stories that just blows your mind. That are you telling me that there's nobody at NASA, there is nobody at the NSA, there's nobody that can figure out how to track these drones? I don't know what's going on there, but I think that it is absolutely crazy that we can't figure this out. But the mysteries continue. Another one, and we're at the end of the year, and there's all sorts of different parties that happen. We celebrate everything that happened in the previous year. We get together with friends and family and reminisce, and certainly there's going to be a lot of parties celebrating the election. We're tomorrow in Sheridan, there's the GOP party, a Christmas party, a little election celebration. Go over all the good work we did getting actual conservatives elected and taking over the House of Representatives. So there's a lot to celebrate. And Time Magazine, as you are all aware, ends up selecting their person of the year. They've done this for as long as I can remember. And, when we take stock of the entire year, who are the people that you would think might be on the short list? Well, certainly the Donald Trump being the first guy since 1895 or something to have a second non-consecutive term as president, to get away is the wrong word, but to show that all of the Democrats' efforts to keep him out of the office were for naught. He got 34 felony counts against him, however many prosecutions. In New York, they fined him $454 million. So all of that, all of the prosecutions, all of the investigations, he was still able to turn the election around and win with a mandate that a Republican hasn't seen in a really long time. So you would think that Donald Trump would be on the short list of Time's Person of the Year. And even if you're a radical leftist, like the people that run Time magazine, I think that you would have to have him in the mix. But guess who is on the top of their list? Kamala Harris. And I quote, the night of July 21st, President Joe Biden announced he was ending his presidential campaign and endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris. This is from Time magazine. For the Democratic nomination. What followed was a remarkable 107-day presidential campaign as Harris sought to become the first woman president. Harris centered her campaign on reproductive rights, slamming former President Donald Trump for his role in the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, and suggested that Trump is a threat to democracy. But she lost to Trump and conceded the race on November 6th. Harris, along with Biden, who previously won Person of the Year in 2020, the year the duo defeated Trump and the former Vice President Mike Pence. Now, again, if you had to list off all the people that you would think would be Person of the Year, I don't think that Kamala Harris should be at the top of it. Maybe biggest losers of the year. Think about it, right? You won the 2020 election, which allegedly garnered you a record number of votes in American politics, though we all know that was bullcrap. And by the way, have you noticed that when Biden was elected, all the media was saying, the record number of people that voted for Joe Biden, more people than in the history of the universe. And now Trump got elected, and election night, a lot of the media coverage said, in a record number of votes. Now, wait a minute. What happened to the previous record? But I digress. Anyway, Kamala Harris is on the short list of Time's Person of the Year. Who else? Kate Middleton. All right, well, she went through cancer, and now, I don't understand why an American company would look to royalty for the Person of the Year, but whatever. Elon Musk. Now, I think that he might be on the list. I don't think he's on the short list, but certainly he's an interesting cat. Quote from Time magazine, Elon Musk has long been an innovative disruptor. From online payments to electric vehicles to commercial space, the Tesla CEO has upended industry. In 2022, he purchased and revamped the social media platform known as Twitter, rebranding it X. Thank God he did that. I still have trouble calling it X and not Twitter. And I am getting really sick of everybody saying formerly known as Twitter. We all know that. The platform is called X now. Let's see here. Benjamin Netanyahu, Jerome Powell, Joe Rogan. Let's talk about Joe Rogan for a minute. Podcaster Joe Rogan has had a major year. The Joe Rogan Experience, a podcast where he talks about current events, comedy, politics, and everything in between, was the top podcast on Spotify in 2024 for the fifth year in a row and averages an astounding 11 million listeners per episode, mostly young men. In August, Netflix aired his live stand-up special, Joe Rogan, Burn Your Boats. In the days leading up to the election, Rogan released a 3-hour interview with Trump, who Rogan later endorsed, with some voters saying that the interview influenced their decision. Rogan is a polarizing figure, having faced backlash for spreading COVID-19 misinformation. He just merely reported the truth. Anyway, let's see here. And on his show, and using racial slurs in the past. Rogan was on the Time 100 list of most influential people in 2022. And then way down on the list is Donald Trump. Here's what Time magazine says about him. Quote, in a stunning political comeback, Donald Trump won the 2024 election. He has reshaped the American electorate, activating young male voters who propelled him to a decisive victory that saw him win the popular vote for the first time and turn every swing state red. Trump's remarkable victory comes after he lost the 2020 election to Biden and reportedly refused to accept the results. Blah, 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 blah. But like I said, don't you think, even those first couple of sentences that I read to you, don't you think that would propel Donald Trump to the top of the list, certainly above the loser, Kamala Harris? I mean, the only thing that she did that was remarkable is all of the crap she would say. And I have to tell you, I am going to miss Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. They were a constant stream of sound bites like this.
True international effort to pressure.
Oh, yes, and I know we are all feeling this.
What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
Yes, I am feeling very unburdened by what has been. But the point is that the liberals will never stop. Not for 1 second will they admit that Donald Trump pulled off an amazing electoral victory. They won't for 1 second take a step back and take stock of how badly they were defeated. That the American people gave him not only an electoral college victory, but he also won the popular vote. Now, for any reasonable person, you would look at that and say, yeah, we got our tail handed, our butts handed to us, and maybe we ought to go along with what the American people said. But nope. Not Democrats, and certainly not on The View. The View yesterday had a collective tantrum over the Daniel Penny verdict. And I know I talked about this yesterday, and you've probably seen the headlines. But he was acquitted of all charges yesterday. Actually, I believe it was on Monday. And and we shouldn't say that it's incredible. Although, given the current political climate, it is incredible that he was acquitted, that you had a reasonable jury in New York look at that and say, the guy's not guilty of the charges. He subdued a guy and the guy later died, but that wasn't Daniel Penny's fault. Maybe Jordan Neely should have laid off all the drugs he was on. Maybe that would have helped him survive that little attack. Maybe he shouldn't have walked on a subway and said, somebody's gonna die and I'll kill an MFer. Maybe he shouldn't have said that. But The View, they had a collective meltdown. And I put together a little bit of a montage for you. Let me pull it up here in the archive. At the end of the year, one of my big tasks is to go through all of the sound bites on my equipment here and figure out which ones are good enough to keep, and which ones out. But at the end of the year, man, the list of sound bites just gets longer and longer. And so here's another one. Here is that montage from The View's collective meltdown about Daniel Penny. Listen to this.
I don't know. I don't know that seeing them celebrating in a bar made me comfortable. I mean, you killed a guy. The man is dead, and
nope,
maybe you
didn't.
You take the celebration home. You don't do it outside. But that's just me.
Shut up,
don't listen to anything I say.
No, we don't.
I think it's a tragedy that Neely is dead today, but I do not think that the villain is Daniel Penny. I think it is the city of New York who repeatedly fails people who could be a danger to themselves and others. And as you mentioned, he was on this list. He had previously assaulted a woman, committed some minor offenses, petty crimes. But he was somebody who I can say I've been on the subway and felt unsafe. People that I've talked to on our staff have been on the subway and felt
guys
unsafe.
Like Penny
and my only criticism of Penny is, could you have not let go sooner?
And subscribe danger and who is dangerous, right? This man got onto the train and he said...
Which one?
Penny.
The victim.
The victim. I'm sorry, Neely, a former Michael Jackson impersonator. He talks about being hungry.
They can't even figure out who the main players in this trial are, and they're having their collective meltdown. They later went on to address the verdict itself by saying that it was a failure of the court that Penny was not convicted. They said that Neely's behavior could have stemmed from his mother's murder and argued that everyone from the hospital to the courts had failed him. Well, we have to get away from being a society that doesn't take personal responsibility for the things that we do. With rights come responsibilities. And if you are a crazy person and you threaten to kill a whole bunch of people, well, mentally challenged or mentally unhinged or not, you're still the person that did that, and you still need to be restrained to protect, everybody else around you, which is what Daniel Penny did. The charges shouldn't even have been filed. Sure, there should have been a little investigation, and they should have never charged him. But it's New York, it's Alvin Bragg, and, we all saw the results of that. But it's not a failure of the court. Oops, wrong soundbite. I keep doing that. This is why I've got to go back and clean up the soundboard. But anyway, there we go. There's the right one. It's not a failure of the court. Nope, it's the court doing what the court is supposed to do. There's no reason to watch The View except for, maybe a little kind of comedic relief. All right, we're more in a minute. don't know if you've noticed this or not, but it's hunting season. And one thing that you can be absolutely certain of is while you're tromping around in the boonies, at some point, it's going to snow. A lot. And you definitely want to make sure that you keep your feet nice and toasty warm. The best way that you can do that is to order a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the warmest socks that I've ever put on my feet. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of people that want to move to our great state. And if you're thinking about selling your house to one of them, you need a real estate agent that you can trust. That agent is Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She's lived in Jackson for almost 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. Last year, she sold almost $25 million worth of property. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Watch out. Cowboy state politics is only going to get stronger. Nobody else on the Wyoming left can even slow this thing down. From every county in this state to every state in this country, it is Cowboy state politics. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, doing what I was born to do with talent given to me by God himself. Before the break, we were talking about the media and those insipid idiots on the news. But there's yet another one on PMS NBC, Joy Reid. And the only reason I bring this up is there's a lot of talk on the media of people praising this assassin that went after the Thompson, the United Healthcare CEO guy, and assassinated him. I don't understand how you could praise that person. And it just shows you that the left will use anything for their political purposes. And one person who has definitely taken up that mantle is Joy Reid from PMS NBC and from Breitbart this morning. Joy Reid yesterday said that conservatism itself justifies violence and that Republicans just elected the Joker. And I quote, MSNBC host Joy Reid said Tuesday on PMS NBC's The Readout that conservatism itself has justified violence, adding that we're Gotham City and the Joker is in charge. Reid said the, quote, 26-year-old suspect in the killing of United Healthcare CEO was back in a Pennsylvania courtroom for an extradition hearing to determine when he'll be brought back to New York to face charges, including second-degree murder. It ought to be first-degree murder, by the way. Alvin Bragg can't figure out how to charge people anyway, but this one, definitely premeditated, and it was definitely an assassination. The case has brought out a clear division in the reaction among those on the right. You see, when popular conservative pundits like Ben Shapiro and the anti-woman zealot Matt Walsh try to attack evil liberals for celebrating the murder of a CEO, they were met with backlash from some of their own supporters. Listen to her saying it.
Jason?
We just witnessed a murder of irony.
Yes.
That was a murder right there.
Dead.
Irony is officially dead. Yeah. Under any and all circumstances, we should not be surprised in this country that just reelected Donald Trump.
And I mean, the reality is, if you go back to the Trayvon Martin case, you can go back before that. You can go back to the justification for lynching among conservatives, whether the conservatives wearing the D uniform or the R uniform. Conservatism itself has justified violence. January 6th, burning down Tulsa and Wilmington, overthrowing the government.
All right. Now, nobody would ever accuse the left of being honest. That's just not what they do. In their mindset, and I talked about this at length yesterday on the program, but in their mindset, lying, cheating, stealing, it's all okay in service to their end goals. And there's nothing that justifies violence. I mean, I would, in politics anyway, you don't solve your political differences through politics. And for Joy Reid to say that conservatism itself justifies violence, oh my God, my friends, let's just think about all the violence that's come from the left, from Madonna saying, you know, I've thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House. The BLM riots of a couple of summers ago, burning down police stations and taking over parts of Seattle. Although that one was mildly humorous, they still did it. The left will always justify violence for their political ends. That's what they do. And if Joy Reid wants to talk about history, let's talk about the history of socialism, which she is absolutely in favor of. In fact, most prominent leftists are. They just won't call it that. But later, she goes on to say that we're Gotham City and we just elected the Joker. Listen to this.
Do that, Jason Johnson. Thank you very much. We're Gotham, and the Joker is in charge. That's just real talk. Coming up next.
Yeah. That's just real talk. Absolutely shocking, and we should expect nothing less from PMS NBC. Now, the corporate media, I told you at the beginning of the program that Biden inflation is up. In fact, it's up 3.3% year over year. In fact, let's go to that article real quick, and I'll give you the rundown on that one. From Breitbart News, and I quote, prices rose at the fastest pace in 4 months in November, the second consecutive month of accelerating inflation. The Consumer Price Index rose 2.7% from a year earlier. The Department of Labor said Wednesday core inflation, a metric that excludes volatile food and energy prices, climbed 3.3% over the past 12 months. So really, when you look at that, the inflation probably rose around 8% if you include food and energy prices, which, of course, you know, we took those out of the formula a long time ago to make things look better for politicians. So inflation still up year over year, no matter what Biden says. But consumer optimism has risen after the U.S. presidential election, as indicated by data from the University of Michigan and the Conference Board. Small business optimism is at the best level in years, with the outlook metric of the National Federation of Independent Businesses measure of the business's confidence. Inflation has worsened since the Federal Reserve began cutting rates in September, a controversial decision that critics said was premature and risked needlessly fueling price pressures. You want to know why? Because interest rates are the way that you take inflated money out of the system. See, the idea is that you print money and you inject it into the economy and to get people to spend. You got more money in your pocket, you're more likely to spend more. And then the Federal Reserve should use inflation, that is the cost of loaning money, to take that cash out of the system on the back end. And of course, you know, consumers pay interest rates. But most of what we experience is being charged the money so that banks can make money. Big banks are loan money, and the interest rate that they are charged for access to capital is what's used to take out inflation out of the market. So money's put in on the front end, inflation rates take it out on the back. But when you cut interest rates, you're not taking any of that money out of the system. So, I mean, it's pretty easy to figure out that, yeah, inflation is going to go up. Despite the uptick in inflation, the Fed is still likely to cut rates when it meets again next week. Holy crap, my friends. If you want to talk about some incompetent people running the country, Jerome Powell, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, everybody in the Harris-Biden administration, they do not have a fundamental understanding of how the economy works. And they have help from the corporate media. I believe this one's from the Federalist. Corporate media are prepping to blame 4 years of Biden inflation on the second Trump administration. Listen to this. You can hardly believe it. If Americans weren't fooled by the propaganda press's inflation idiocy before the 2024 election, then they certainly won't be fooled about this either. Corporate media spent the entirety of the Biden administration running interference for the inflation caused by Democrats' multi-trillion-dollar spending spree. As President-elect Donald Trump prepares to take back the White House next month, however, The same propaganda press that pretended inflation didn't exist are gearing up to blame price hikes and underwhelming job reports on the Republican. Quote, the evidence is increasingly clear that Donald Trump will inherit a healthy economy when he returns to the White House next month, albeit one with some soft spots. Politico's Friday Playbook PM claimed, citing the Bureau of Labor Statistics' latest job report. Here's their announcement. Quote, on the jobs, the evidence is increasingly clear that Donald Trump will inherit a healthy economy. Now, the blurb didn't simply regurgitate President Biden's statement hailing the latest report as America's comeback. It also conveniently glazed over the fact that the Democrat regime repeatedly took credit for hundreds of thousands of jobs that, after revisions, were determined to be non-existent. Don't you remember that a couple of months ago? The Biden administration said, look at all of these jobs we created. When in truth, none of them were real. It was all propaganda that was pushed by the Biden administration and their lapdogs in the media. None of this is Trump's fault. And if you want to be absolutely clear, when Trump left office in 2020, the economy was on the rebound. Of course, we had COVID in the middle, but you went from a rocking economy to everything being shut down. And then after COVID, the economy started to move on the uptick. Biden takes over and inflation skyrockets. It was with the core inflation rate, I think at one point was like 9.9% and went up. And, every successive month we saw, inflation rose 1.2% this month. Well, you have to add that to the previous month, that it is cumulative. It's not just one of these things that's stagnant, that goes up and down month after month. If the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Fed are all telling you that inflation went up from what it was last month, well, to figure out the true number, you have to add up all the months that came before it to figure out what the inflation rate actually is. It's more bullcrap from the Biden administration. Here's another headline that ought to scare the crap out of you. Biden looking to remove al-Qaeda-linked group from the terror list and remove a $10 million bounty off of its leader. Oh, my God. President Joe Biden is reportedly looking to remove one of the Islamic terrorist groups that overthrew the Syrian government last week from the U.S. Foreign Terrorist Organization. This is why I told you at the beginning of the program that we have to be very clear about who deposed Bashar al-Assad. Who are these rebels? We can't just out of hand say, oh, look, they got rid of a dictator. They must be good people. That's insane. We have to do our research. And the truth is, this article right here tells you that they are not these democracy-loving freedom fighters that we always say they're going to be. And think about Ukraine for a minute. Everybody said, and I remember this headline, I probably should have saved the article, but Zelensky is the next George Washington. A what? Zelensky is the guy that canceled the press, that closed down churches, that had his SWAT teams, of course they don't call them SWAT teams, but had his SWAT teams raid churches. Zelensky is not George Washington, nor is he a fan of democracy at all. But we continually do this, right? We inject our own our own belief in freedom and liberty into all these people around the world without ever doing any research. And this is the classic example. Okay, so some al-Qaeda-linked terrorists overthrew Bashar al-Assad. That doesn't mean that we should cozy up to them and be friends. Quote, multiple current and former Biden administration officials told NBC News that Biden was looking to help the terrorist group soon by removing the designation, which would allow the group a way to get help from other foreign governments. Biden also wants to remove a $10 million bounty off the head of the terrorist group's leader, Abu Muhammad Jawlani. Former CENTCOM commander, retired General Frank McKenzie, said during an interview over the weekend that Jawlani has, quote, a significant track record of terrorism, and the notion that terrorists can change is absolutely ridiculous. And I quote, certainly, he could advance new ideas coming in, he said. It's been my experience, though, that typically that doesn't work. No kidding, because they're terrorists. I don't understand what these people are thinking. Well, maybe they're not thinking. They're Democrats, and they don't really care what happens. Chaos befits them. We'll continue after the break.
Run, run,
are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a better source of news, information, and entertainment than right here on the Independence Network. Now, we're making a few changes, moving a couple things around, out with the old and in with the new, and that whole spiel. Of course, you could listen to my program, The Ramble Room with Ken Pendergraft, Locked and Loaded with the good Representative Tony Locke from Casper. There's a whole bunch more coming on the Independence Network. Also, don't forget to check out the article section at the website, independencenetwork.us. It's loaded with op-eds, commentary, and news from all around the Cowboy State. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program. The phone lines are open here in the studio. If you want to get a hold of me, the phone number is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. If there's something on your mind that you want to talk about, go ahead and give me a call, and we'll talk about it. Welcome back to the program, my friends. There is, and again, the whole theme of today's program is headlines that ought to make you want to poop your pants. Here is another one. Ex-CCP officials funneled millions to U.S. universities' nonprofits to promote green energy. Tax forms show. And I quote, a climate nonprofit run by former Chinese Communist Party officials funneled millions of dollars to U.S. universities and left-wing groups to promote replacing fossil fuels with green energy. Tax forms reviewed by the Washington Free Beacon show. The climate nonprofit, formerly known as the Energy Foundation, but which dubs itself Energy Foundation China, wired grants to Harvard College, the University of California at Berkeley, the University of California at Los Angeles, the University of Maryland, to support research and education on building a clean energy future, that's in quotations, and advancing, quote, low-carbon cities. The Energy Foundation gave a total of $630,000 to 4 universities in 2023. All 4 of which promote far-left climate policies. So why then would the Chinese want to be interested in a clean energy economy? Because they pretty much have the corner on the market of all of the materials necessary to build all of these clean energy things. Right now, you can't really build a solar panel without getting rare earth minerals from China. Now, the question is, do we have those rare earth minerals here at home? Absolutely we do. There's a couple different mines that are going to open in Wyoming, or at least that's what the headlines have said. But we haven't done that. Instead, we have relied on China for all of those. And the truth is, we rely on China for a whole heck of a lot of our stuff. And another thing that ought to scare you to death is that almost all of our medicine comes from China. All of our antibiotics come from the Chinese Communist Party. So then, when you look at this piece and say, all right, so why are they interested in a green energy economy? Well, it fuels their whole agenda. It fuels their economy. Continuing, the Energy Foundations also funneled $1.5 million to the following left-wing climate nonprofits. Listen to this. The Rocky Mountain Institute. I wonder where they're at. International Council on Clean Transportation Institute for Transportation and Development Policy, and the Natural Resources Defense Council. Those groups are all dedicated to promoting the phase out of fossil fuels and mass expansion of costly green energy alternatives. The Chinese-tied organization's involvement in the American climate movement is indicative of how China seeks to influence the U.S. economy and weaken the billion-dollar fossil fuel sector. China stands to benefit from a global green transition. Chinese business dominates solar, wind, and electric vehicle supply chains, while America dominates in oil and gas production. So it's exactly as I said. It's all an economic ploy to push our economy more towards green energy and away from fossil fuels, because, of course, we can produce fossil fuels here. We need all the supplies and supply chains and parts and everything to do this whole clean energy bull crap from China. So, of course, it fits their purposes. And they've been funneling education institutions in America to do it. And I would love to see if there are any grants going to the University of Wyoming. I would hope not, but it would not surprise me. Now, the University of Wyoming's made some changes recently. And, from the outside, they all look good. But we definitely need to look into what the University of Wyoming has been doing with all of our money. And that's another thing, too. Something to, the legislative session is coming up, and the past few sessions, of course, things are different now. Conservatives now control the House of Representatives, at least, and there's major questions about the Senate. But in previous sessions, you heard the words University of Wyoming come up a lot, and it was hundreds of millions of dollars over the past just 4 years that were funneled to the university. And at one point, it was like, over the span of weeks, you heard $70 million to UW for this, $70 million to UW for that, $50 million to UW for that. Absolutely incredible. And then they have the gall to focus a lot of their energy on DEI initiatives, even though the legislature resoundingly told them no. Now, of course, it didn't get past Tara Nethercott and the Second Joint Conference Committee. She made sure that all of that money still went to the university, though, the headline was, University of Wyoming does away with their DEI program. No, they didn't. They just closed the office and changed the names and reassigned the people to different departments, while at the same time they're doing the same crap. I mean, it's absolutely stupid that the media buys into this crap. Or, if it's like the national media, they are totally on board with it. Well, according to The Hill, there has been another country heard from. Cheney responds to Trump's jail threat. Here's the truth. Now, first of all, if you watched and I played part of this on the program yesterday. In fact, I think let me see if I can dig up that soundbite. But there was an interview released with Donald Trump, and I believe it went out yesterday, where he was asked, hey, what are you going to do with all these people that didn't vote for you? And here we go. Hold on here, and I'll play it for you. Let's see here. I think it's this one.
I want to ask you, sir, one final question.
Listen to this.
What do you want to say to Americans who didn't support you in this campaign?
I'm going to treat you every bit as well as I have treated the greatest MAGA supporters. There's never been anything like MAGA in the history of this country. These people are so dedicated to making America great again. It's very simple. And I'm going to treat them just the same as I treat MAGA. We're going to treat everybody good. We want success for our country. We want safety for our country. Our country is under threat, as you know. We have a tremendous threat militarily because of the power of weapons and weaponry. It's a tremendous threat. Nobody talks about it, but it's a tremendous threat. I want to treat everybody the same. I want to treat them well. And at the end of this 4 years, and I have a big head start because I was there for 4 years fairly recently. A lot of bad things were done during the 4 years that I wasn't there, and mostly in what they've done in terms of our reputation overseas. Our reputation is so bad, so shot. I got to bring it back, and I also have to bring back civilization to our country. Our country is a crime pot, and we have to get rid of crime. We have so many things to do. We have to do the prices. We have to do all of that. But we have to get the criminals out of our country. We have to bring down crime. People have to be able to walk across the street and buy a loaf of bread without being shot. And that's going to happen. But what I say to them is, I love you, and we're going to all work together, and we're going to bring it together. And you know what's going to bring it together? Success. I saw that just prior to COVID coming in.
All right. That's enough. So, I mean, that's a piece of the interview, and he very clearly says, he's not interested in, being vindictive or going after people. But here's what the piece from The Hill says, quote, former Representative Liz Cheney responded to President-elect Trump's threat that he would throw members who sat on the January 6th committee in jail, calling his remarks, quote, an assault on the rule of law. She says, here's the truth. Donald Trump attempted to overturn the 2020 election and seize power, Cheney said in a statement provided to The Hill. He mobilized an angry mob and sent them to the U.S. Capitol, where they attacked police officers, invaded the building, blah, blah, blah. On Sunday, Trump joined Meet the Press Kristen Welker, and that's what I just played for you, for his first sit-down interview since winning the election in November. In the conversation, he indicated that he would not explicitly order those he's appointing to top positions to go after his political enemies, but referenced jailing members who served on the January 6th panel. He called Cheney's actions inexcusable and argued that she was behind the entire committee's operations. Trump said, honestly, they should all go to jail, referring to the panel's members. Now, I don't know if you agree with that or not, but they did commit a crime. A vast majority of the evidence that they said that they uncovered, all the interviews and transcripts and all of that from the January 6th committee, was destroyed when that committee disbanded. They destroyed evidence. They destroyed the congressional record. That is a crime for which they should be prosecuted. But here's my opinion on the whole thing. While I don't think politically it worked out that good for Gerald Ford, I think that pardoning Nixon was a good idea. The country had to move on from the Watergate scandal. There was a lot of people that needed to be held accountable, but Gerald Ford looked at that whole thing and said, I'm just going to pardon Richard Nixon. I'm not saying that Trump should issue pardons to all of these people. I don't think that he should. I think that all of that needs to be left up to prosecutors. We are a nation of laws. We're not a nation of men. And you have to leave those decisions up to prosecutors. But I do think that Trump should just move on. We got a lot more things we got to worry about. We have to worry about our economy, getting it back on track. And, relitigating the past is not going to get us anywhere, even though, as I said, those folks deserve to be prosecuted for the crimes that they committed. And I think that it's very telling that you're seeing the left-wing media talk about preemptive pardons and, will Christopher Wray get a pardon? Will all of these people get a pardon? Well, I think that is entirely inappropriate. You can't have a pardon unless you're guilty of a crime, and if they're not guilty of a crime, then they don't need a pardon. But my point is that Trump should move on. However, his Department of Justice should do what the Department of Justice does and prosecute people who committed crimes. That's just the long and the short of it. And we have to get to a place in our country where, we don't prosecute people based on politics. That's what third world banana republics do. And it's what the Biden administration has been trying to do to Donald Trump. Well, it's not just the Biden administration, it's the media, it's the Democrats in Congress. Since the moment he took the oath of office, they've been trying to slap him in jail for one reason or another. And we've got to get past that. Trump just needs to get on his agenda, turn his folks loose that he's nominated, and just let the chips fall where they may. Well, we've come to the end of another busy broadcast day here on Cowboy State Politics. Stay tuned. The Cowboy State Politics podcast will be released shortly after this episode, probably around noon or so. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics.